So as you listen to me in the background, just take a moment to close your eyes and begin to relax. And you don't have to know how you're going to begin to relax, because you can just relax in your own unique way. And while you listen to me and relax, I'll tell you this adult bedtime story. And it's a story about a man who is sitting on a bench. And one day, a monk walking past is just walking past in a relaxed way, being mindful of each step that he takes. And as he walks past, he notices this man sat on a bench. He notices that the man appears to be sad. And the man looks like he's perhaps depressed and he's not particularly motivated. So the monk decides to sit down on the bench. And he turns to the man who's looking sad on the bench. And he asks him, "What's your story?" And the man doesn't respond. And so the monk calmly and firmly asks again, "What's your story?" And the way the monk asked helps jolt the man out of that world that he was in his mind. He shakes his head slightly as he brings himself round and he turns towards the monk. He sees the monk sat there. And he starts to tell his story. He talks about how he had a beautiful wife. She was incredibly attractive, she seemed really sweet, but it turned out that she was bad for him. He did anything he could for her. He wanted her to be in his life, so he would do anything he could to try to make sure that that happened. But what he found was that all she did was took from him. And he felt good while he was with her. But then he ended up feeling bad when they were apart. And he kind of craved wanting to be with her. Even though he could see the harm she was doing to him. He spoke about how he didn't have much money. But he spent what he did have on his wife. But that meant that then he didn't have enough money for the essentials that he needed. He spent money on fast cars, expensive items, and he would end up feeling sad, or feeling like he might lose her. So he'd want to spend lots of money on her. And whenever he felt sad, he would want to spend lots of money on himself to make himself happy. But then he would end up feeling guilty and end up feeling anxious and then end up feeling sad again. Then he ended up getting more and more in debt, with the debt growing larger and larger all the time. And he described to the monk that it's like a kind of sad, happy guilt cycle, where he'd feel sad, he'd spend lots of money to make himself feel happy, and then he'd feel guilty for all the money he spent, which would make him feel sad again. And the cycle would continue. He spoke about how he finally left his wife But now he feels like there's something missing in his life. Up to this point, the monk had just been paying the man attention, just listening, just absorbing what he's given. And then he leaned in and he said to the man that it reminds him of the story of Hansel and Gretel. Reminds him of the story of the two of them finding a house made of sweets. And they eat the sweets and they kind of know that something's wrong with the house. But they like the sweets, so they eat the sweets. And they munch their way through the walls and they eat the sweets. And then the lady in the house keeps giving them more and more sweets. And they just accept them and keep eating and eating and eating. Unaware that really they're being fattened up for the day that the witch can eat them. And the monk explained that the good thing about that story is that eventually they realized in time what was going on. And they managed to turn things around so that they could escape and they could get out of there. The monk explained that he could help the man to feel better. He could help the man to find a new path, to find a new way of filling that hole. He suggested that they go back to the man's house, to take a look at the house, so that he can share how he can help. And so the man and the monk walked down the road back to the man's house. And when they arrived at the man's house, the monk commented on the amount of junk that was in the house, all the stuff that the man had been buying over the years. And the man commented that he finds it overwhelming. He looks at the task of having to clear the house, having to sell things, tidy up, and all the different things he has to do, and he just feels he's got too much on his plate. He's aware that he needs less on his plate. He needs to start somewhere small. He shared how he's uncomfortable with all the clutter, and that too much clutter gives him a bad feeling in his stomach, and he just can't relax. So the monk says that he'll start to help with the clutter, and that as the clutter clears, so the mind will clear also. And as the mind clears, so the man will begin to see things clearer and see where he can do and make different decisions and find a new path. And together they make a list of essential things which should be in the house, a list of the essential things he needs to do, a list of those things he needs to clear out, and the things he needs to do to keep the house clear of junk in the future, so that he doesn't slip back into his old patterns, so that he takes on new patterns, new ways of being, and just follows these new patterns. And after the house is clear, the monk and the man walk around the house, at the clear kitchen, clear living room, clear dining room, gazing out the window over the beautiful garden, clear and organised bedrooms. All the rooms are organised. And the monk tells the man he'll teach him some helpful lessons for the future. So he asks the man to go to the beach with him. And the man complained. He said how he's no longer got a car, and so he can't go to the beach with the monk. And the beach is only a few miles down the road, so the monk suggests that they walk. And the man complained again. He complained that it's too much effort, it's too far to walk to the beach. And anyhow, he felt, the walk to the beach would be so boring. He's someone who prefers to jump in a car and be somewhere as quickly as possible. And the monk firmly insists. And he's got a way of kindly insisting things that encourages people to feel comfortable doing things that are for their own benefit. And the man and the monk walk to the beach, and as they walk to the beach, the man notices the feeling of the breeze on his skin, on his cheeks as they walk. He notices the sound of rustling leaves in the trees as he's walking down the path, notices the sounds of his footsteps, and as he continues walking with the monk, he notices the feeling of his arms moving as they swing side to side, notices the feeling of the ground beneath each footstep. He sees birds flying and perching in trees, and landing and taking off of the path in front of him. He sees butterflies, insects, beetles. He sees so much he normally misses by speeding along in his car. And every now and then the monk and the man strike up conversation. Just general chat. And at some point during the walk, the man goes inside his mind and tells himself how he's beginning to enjoy the journey. He'd always thought that the journey was the inconvenient part, that when you're going somewhere, the important part is where you're going. He'd never considered that you can enjoy your journey to the destination. He always thought you had to make the journey as quick as possible, because it's just a journey. Now he was beginning to realize that the journey doesn't have to be quick. The journey can be as long as the journey is. The important thing is enjoying that journey as much as you would enjoy the destination. And that sometimes plans change and you don't reach the destination you aimed for. But if you've enjoyed the journey, wherever you end up is okay. And the man gave a little smile. And with this, the monk looked over and said, "It looks like you enjoy walking, after all." And the man smiled some more and began to pick up the pace, because the man really was enjoying the journey now. He really was enjoying walking. He never thought he would enjoy walking. But now he's aware he'll probably walk far more often in the future. And as they arrive at the beach, so the path changes to stones, and they walk on the stones, and the sound changes of each footstep as they walk along the stones. And the man's aware of the sound of the sea, aware of looking out to the horizon, of other sounds around, of the sun in the sky, of the temperature. And they find somewhere to comfortably sit down on the beach. And the monk talked about how you choose your friends wisely, about how some people can be a problem and difficult to deal with, and you don't want them to be on your plate, you don't want to have to deal with them, whereas others make you feel good. Others make you happy, and in doing so, they boost your health and your well-being, and they're the ones to spend time with. Those that make you healthy and feel good. And the monk says to the man, while he sat on the beach, to take a moment to close your eyes. And with your eyes closed, in a moment, I'm going to reach over and lift up your hand. And when I do, your hand is going to begin to get lighter and lighter and raise up more and more comfortably. And then the monk continued talking about something else. And the man was feeling a bit uncomfortable with the uncertainty of not knowing when that hand will lift. He was trying to hear the monk, he could hear the sea, he could feel the breeze as he sat there, waiting and waiting. And what he began to notice was that as that man sat there waiting, as time ticked by, and the monk wasn't reaching over and lifting that arm, he began to shift inside himself. He began to shift from anticipation and uncertainty and uncomfortableness, waiting to know what's happening, to finding himself wander in his mind and wonder, and finding himself becoming more comfortable and relaxed. And he noticed how he was relaxing deeper and deeper with each out-breath, and that as he was relaxing deeper and deeper with each out-breath, so each out-breath was stretching slightly longer than each in-breath. And he began to notice that this is how to relax yourself. And while the man was beginning to relax, and beginning to relax deeper and deeper, he mentioned that his brain constantly seemed to be on the go. It constantly seemed to be chattering and being drawn to things that upset him, drawn to things that he worried about the future. He worried about the past. He would tell himself that he was bored. He would say lots of negative things to himself. And the monk explained that that's okay. It's just your brain thinking. So all you have to do is just say to yourself, my brain's having a thought again. And any time a thought that you don't want is there, just think to yourself, my brain's thinking again. Oh, my brain's thinking again. Oh, my brain's thinking again. Because in reality, that's the only truth there is in that moment. Because all it is a thought inside your mind. And so the man gave this some thought, and he embedded this idea deep into his mind to instinctively and unconsciously just think, my brain's thinking again. Not to attach to it or let it have any feeling or effect on him, but just to acknowledge it for exactly what it is, that it is just the brain saying something. It isn't real life, it is just the brain saying something. So there's no need for him to get emotional about that thinking. It's just the brain thinking, nothing more, nothing less. All he has to do is observe it, just as you can observe clouds floating by in the sky. You can observe sticks floating by on a stream. You don't have to try to grab every cloud or try to grab every stick, or give a judgment about the cloud or the stick. You can just watch, indifferently just letting it pass by. And while the man continued to sit quietly, the monk asked him to begin to observe your surroundings. Begin to enjoy being in the moment. Enjoy the inner journey. And so the man began with his eyes closed to pay attention to the water of the sea and the sounds the water made, to pay attention to sounds around him, to the sound of the wind, to the feelings of the breeze, of the ground beneath him. And he paid attention to his surroundings, and he allowed himself to enjoy the moment. And almost like drifting comfortably asleep, he drifted into an inner journey of discovery, personal growth and development. And he found himself in a forest. And everywhere he looked, everything looked the same. And he thought to himself, I now know where the saying, can't see the wood for the trees, comes from. Because being in the middle of the forest, he couldn't see anything. He couldn't make out anything. It all just looked the same. Most of the sounds echoed around the forest, and he couldn't work out what direction they came from. Then he walked through the forest, found his way through the forest. He figured out how to find his path, and he had to cut his path through to make it easier to walk. And he knew that by cutting his path through, it would be easier to follow that path back. And after some time of cutting through, he found a shack deep in the forest. And in the shack he found a chair, and in that chair he relaxed. And while he relaxed deeply in that chair, he drifted off into the most profound, deep, relaxing sleep. And in this deep, relaxing sleep, he began to have different thoughts spontaneously come up in his mind, different images, like dreams coming up in his mind. And he experienced many dreams in his sleep. And while he experienced many dreams in his sleep, he found healthy alternatives to old habits, new and healthy ways of living life. And these new and healthy ways of living life embedded themselves in the neurology, part of who he is, and he gained insight about himself. He learned lessons, how to relax, how to control urges, how to look at the larger picture, rather than just deciding if something looks sweet, it's going to be good. Instead, knowing that sometimes there's more to something than what you see on the surface. And then as you comfortably drift deeper and deeper asleep, the man began to wake up and found himself in that shack and walked back along the path he had cut. And on his journey back he cut it a little wider, knowing that every time he visits this place and every time you listen to this, that the path will be easier and easier to follow because it's cut wider and wider. And he knew he'd found some answers to help him to become the person he wants to be. And he found his way back and opened his eyes on the beach and noticed his arm was in the air, just floating in the air. And he slowly lowered his arm to his lap and then opened his eyes again. And he felt this was the first time he truly opened his eyes, that the world he was living in before, the way he was living before, his eyes truly weren't open. And now his eyes are open. And he began to enjoy that feeling of knowing changes have taken place in your mind and body. And he sat for a while talking to the monk, gaining lots of helpful information and all you need to know, before he went back home for the night, settled down in bed, and comfortably and relaxed drift off to sleep.